Hi guys, it's Mrs. Williams, and today we're going to learn about solving 1 and 2-step equations. So before we get started, make sure you have your notes ready, that you're fit, and you have checked your tech. Okay, everybody ready? Here we go. Now before we actually solve an equation, I want to ask you a question. What are inverse operations? Well, inverse operations are opposite operations that undo each other. For instance, what's the inverse of addition? What's the inverse of multiplication? That's division. And the inverse of squaring would be taking the square root. Now, likewise, what's the inverse of subtraction? It's addition. What's the inverse of division? It's multiplication. And what's the inverse of a square root? That would be squaring. They undo each other. If you add 2 and then you subtract 2, you have basically done nothing. It's like turning on the lights and turning off the lights. You're still in the dark. Okay? So when we solve equations, we use inverse operations. Not only that, what we do is we use the opposite or the inverse, the opposite operations in the opposite order. So the reason I changed inverse to opposite is just so you have all those O words, because you kind of remember it when it's a whole bunch of O words. So we use the opposite operations in the opposite order. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's an example. We're going to solve x plus 5x plus 2 equals 20. Now the first step is to combine like terms if we have any. And notice in this problem, we have x plus 5x. So what we really have is 6x plus 2 equals 20. Now, what operations are being done to the variable? What I'm asking is, if I asked you to plug a number in for x, say I asked you to plug in 10 for x, what would you do to the 10? The first thing you would do is you would multiply by 6, and then you would add 2, right? Because here's the x, and you're going to multiply by 6, and then you would add 2. So those are the operations that we do. Now we want to do the opposite operations in the opposite order. So we're going to work backwards. What's the opposite of adding 2? That's subtracting 2. What's the opposite of multiplying by 6? That's dividing by 6. So when we go to solve, we're going to take this equation, 6x plus 2 equals 20, and we're going to do the opposite operations in the opposite order. So we're going to do this minus 2 first. But whatever, and I can do anything I want to one side of an equation as long as I do it to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 2 over here. When I do that, I'm going to get 6x, and 2 minus 2 is 0. 20 minus 2 is 18. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do that next opposite operation in the opposite order, which is divide by 6. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. And when I do that, 6x divided by 6, those 6's cancel out, and I just get x. And 18 divided by 6 is 3. And lo and behold, we have our answer, x equals 3. So if you look at what we did, first thing we did was combine any like terms. Then we looked and we said, all right, if I was going to be plugging something in for x, I would first multiply by 6, then add 2. We figured out the opposite operations in the opposite order. Subtract 2, divide by 6. And that's what we did to both sides of the equation. First, we subtracted the 2, then we divided by 6. And that gave us our solution. Let's try another one. So here's one. We're going to solve x divided by 7 minus 3 equals 19. So the first step is to combine like terms. Notice it says if there are any, and guess what? There are none in this problem, so we don't have to do this first step. Okay, now what are the operations that are being done? So if I was going to plug a number in for x, what would I do to it? First thing is I would divide by 7. Then it would be subtract the 3. So now we're going to do the opposite operations in the opposite order. What's the opposite of adding 3? Oh, subtracting 3? That's adding 3. What's the opposite of dividing by 7? That's multiplying by 7. So here we go. I'm going to rewrite the equation so that it's down here. X over 7 minus 3 equals 19. Well, we're going to add 3 to both sides. And that's going to give us x over 7. And the 3's are going to add to 0. And 19 plus 3 is 22. Okay. Now we're supposed to multiply both sides by 7. The 7's will cancel out. And we're going to have x. And then we have 22 times 7. And if you need your calculator, it's okay. That's 154. And we have actually found our solution. X is 154. And you can always go back to the original problem and plug it in. What's 154 divided by 7 and then subtract 3? You should get 19. Okay? Let's try one more without all the steps. How can we use this method without having that box? Think about this. If we were going to plug something in, what would be the operations, okay? What are the operations that we are doing in this problem? When we plug it in for x, we're first going to add 22, then we would divide by 3. So now we want to do the opposite operations. So the opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. The opposite of adding 22 is subtracting 22. So here we go. The first step, multiply both sides by 3. And it's nice because right here those 3's cancel out. And we're left with 22 plus x equals, and 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. Now the next step, we subtract 22 by both sides. And notice that's going to leave us with the x all by itself on the left-hand side. And negative 21 plus a negative 22 is negative 43, and we have solved our equation. Well, there you go, guys. So that's what we've done. Remember, the key here is using the inverse operations, the opposite operations in the opposite order. The opposite of addition is subtraction. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. Okay, so here we go. And again, don't forget, do your summary, formulate your question for tomorrow, and complete your post-video Google form. I'll see you guys in next class. Bye.